right, so welcome to the Praxis Behind the Obscure podcast. And in the second episode, I have a good friend of mine, Mr. Zenas on. We've known each other maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 years or so, would you say? Something like that.
It goes back a while. It goes back to 2012, 8 years, 7, 8 years, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So, he lived out here in Korea and then recently moved back to America. And very interesting timing because I think it was about a month, maybe a month or two after you went back. That's when the pandemic started, right? Something like that?
It started right before I got back, but yeah, it started here in America right in that first month that I got here. So it's been a lot of sheltering in place.
Right. And I noticed that you use this as a chance. You know, some people use it as a chance to whine and complain, or other people use it as a chance to, I don't know, sit at home and watch Netflix or something. But I recall you saying you read a lot of books and did a lot of inner work and spiritual work and kind of maximized the pandemic in that regard, right? So I thought it'd be good to have you on today. And just to start out, I'm curious, how would you define spirituality? What would you say is the purpose of spirituality?
How I would define spirituality to start with, there are three aspects to the self, right? We have our body, which is driven by evolution, our evolutionary needs, our emotions. We can think of this as our lizard brain, right? So we have our body. We have our mind, which is maybe our higher functioning. It's our identity. It's our stories about our life. It's our judgments. It's where our ego lives. And then we have this third part of ourselves that a lot of people are not conscious of, and that's our higher consciousness. So in the definition of spirituality, our goal then is to become more aware of our higher consciousness, and there are advantages to that, which we can talk about a little bit later. And we do that not by adding things, but by removing obstacles. And specifically, the ego is our obstacle to our higher consciousness and our connectedness to more useful emotional states.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I like that definition. Okay, so what would you say is the value in this? Like, some people might listen to that and say that sounds cool or interesting or nice theory, bro, or something like that, right? But
Come at me, bro.
What would you say? Like, yeah. What would you say is the value in this, or the purpose, the value? Why should someone get into something like this?
I think when we look at what the value is, we have to also understand like why the ego is an obstacle and what the unvalue is in the normalness that people go through everyday life. Because when we come at interacting with the world from the ego state, and a lot of people, when they hear ego, they think of like, oh, I'm better than everyone else, but it's just also, you could be like, oh, I'm the weakest, right? So it's about somehow being more than somebody else, even if it's like being the worst or the best. But when we come from the approach to the world of coming from the ego, it's always unfulfilled. And a term you might have heard is hedonistic adaptation. So we strive and we work and we get that first $1 million. Are we satisfied? Sure. Does that make us happy? Does that make us whole? Does that make us complete? Or do we immediately need the next $2,000 to $2 million?
Sure.
Right? So when we're interacting with the world from the ego state, what people would normally call happiness, or I call satisfaction, and that's always temporary.
Okay.
So we're never whole or complete. There's always going to be that need, and always when we reach a level that we think will make us complete or whole, it never does. So
Okay.
the value is once we remove the obstacle of negative emotions and ego, then we're vibrating at a higher state of consciousness. We're more connected to
Hmm.
a true state of love rather than a needy, attached state of love, which is the ego state of love. So that
Okay.
our
So you would say it leads to a more fulfilling, just overall, a more sense of fulfillment or wellness or things along those lines, rather than sort of being a crack addict chasing the next, what would you say, next high or next thing that you think is going to fulfill you, which in turn doesn't, right? It's an endless cycle.
yeah. So the value is that you actually connect to wholeness and completeness,
Hmm.
and you find freedom from pain and suffering. So
Hmm.
the first noble truth of Buddhism, and you'll find this in Stoicism also, is that life has suffering. So
Hmm.
the path of spirituality is the question of, okay, so how do I end suffering in my life?
Right.
And you end suffering in your life by reducing your ego and your emotional pain. And then once you remove those obstacles, your natural state of love, joy, and peace get to shine through.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, yes, makes absolute sense. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Buddhism, so yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, it's quite interesting. So, if somebody's listening to this, they might think, how would one do something like this? Like, there's meditation, there's a lot of different kind of techniques, different teachings out there, right? Maybe you can share perhaps your own personal practice or personal experience working, with the ego and sort of achieving wholeness, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do want to start out by saying, like, I'm a student. I'm trying not to put my ego into this and like be like, oh, I've got it
Uh-huh.
down. I'm perfect. Listen to everything I have to say. Uh, so, um, you know, I feel like we fluctuate and we vibrate higher and we go to a higher state and we can fall and we go back up. And, once we've realized a higher state, it's easier to get back to because you can recognize it. And I will say,
Mhm.
like, for our listeners out there who maybe aren't sure what I'm talking about, like, if you've ever been in nature or watched a sunset and you felt like just totally at peace, you look at something really, really beautiful and your mind stops talking and you feel at peace and like one with the universe or a loving feeling, that is kind of the state I'm talking about that you can reach.
Mhm.
So
Sort
as
of, sort of a transcendent kind of consciousness, right?
yeah, as a reference point, I think most people at some point in their life have experienced something like that, where they've actually,
Sure.
not through a conscious practice or anything, but just through the beauty of the universe, been able to have their ego just be quiet for a little while.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I've read many books and tried many things. And for me, the most effective thing I've used, meditation is definitely helpful. I've read a lot of people don't really know. A lot of people take meditation way too seriously, is what it is. They,
Yeah, that's a good
you know
point.
what I mean?
Okay,
Like they
that's
think
fair.
I have to sit
That's fair. Yeah.
cross-legged for 10 hours and have
Right.
the Zen monks hit me with a stick when I fall asleep, or
Right.
if you're taking it too seriously, you might be doing it wrong. So
Hmm.
one thing is to like not get caught up in the form. Find what's comfortable for you. Like I'll do standing, I'll do moving, I'll do lying. I'll do like
Sure.
several things in one session. Um,
Hmm.
what works for you, and meditation helps bring you into the present moment. The book
Hmm.
Letting Go, which we were discussing, we're going to discuss a little bit later, but this has been a really key breakthrough. So like before I'd read Byron Katie and the work and done the, letting go of your thoughts, right? Being able to control or let go of negative thoughts that come up. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the big breakthroughs I've had listening to and reading the book, Letting Go, is that if we let go of our emotions are
Mm-hmm.
responsible for, tens or hundreds or thousands of different thoughts.
Sure.
So the practice of letting go of our emotions basically is a very efficient way of reducing our ego. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to give a very specific technique that I use that is the most effective one. So it's,
Okay, that sounds interesting.
yeah. So with meditation, and it could be standing or sitting or lying, whatever you're comfortable with. But closing your eyes so you can focus on your inner body. And
Mm-hmm.
then I use a breathing and visualization technique.
Okay.
So, normally with meditation, you slow down your breathing, you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. So I will do this and I will visualize breathing in blue, white, healing light into my
Mm-hmm.
body, and it will push down into my body, and then I will imagine the negative emotion as a black or red black or yellow depending on the emotion. I'll imagine it as a physical substance like a smoke or a tar, and as
Okay.
the blue healing light that I'm breathing in through my nose goes down and in, it pushes up the negative energy, negative emotion, and I breathe it out. However many times it takes for
Mm.
me to imagine breathing in positive healing, blue light, breathing out negative emotion.
Mm.
And
Okay. That's
I find the visualization helps, helps solidify that emotion into an object that can be dealt with or handled.
right. Okay, that's really good. I think the fact that you incorporate so many things into it, like breathing and visualization and emotions and feelings. Like I find that there are different ways to meditate. I generally meditate every day, but I found that techniques that involve, maybe initially you just want to focus on breathing or pranayama, something like that, just to get into the flow of things, or a very simple meditative technique like mindfulness, perhaps, right? But I find like the more that you incorporate um, different aspects, different focuses, like you were saying, the energy, the breathing, the emotions, then you become very absorbed into it. It becomes even more powerful, I would say, in my experience personally.
Yeah, and
And it becomes more of like a real experience, right? It becomes more real, so to speak. So yeah,
yeah, I
instead
mean,
of
I'm a
like, because a
very
lot of people, you're
visually
saying like
oriented
meditation.
person too, and I want to recognize like maybe if you're
Mm-hmm.
more like if you're a musician, maybe you'll imagine like a sound. Maybe that's more useful to
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
So like just because I know that this
Mm-hmm.
works for me, I'm not trying to say it works for everybody, but it's, like a template that can be
Mm-hmm.
used using audio visualization, maybe kinesthetics. I notice if I put my hands
Mm-hmm.
in different positions on my body or different formations with my fingers and my hands, it creates different energy resonances. So
Mm-hmm.
people can experiment with
Like a
that also.
mudra, kind of like a mudra or something like this, right? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. One thing I do notice too, we're talking about meditation, is that a lot of people, they quit meditation because, or these kind of techniques, because their mind starts wandering, or, they're like, it doesn't work for me or something, right? And so they get very judgmental about their mind wandering, rather than,
Mm,
it's very normal in these kind of practices, right? So, a Buddhist meditation teacher, I remember they taught, like, when your mind starts thinking, just say to yourself, thinking, realize that you're thinking, and then go back to the breathing, or back to the, practice that you're doing, rather than, so it's a very non-judgmental, more of an
yeah,
objective,
yeah.
like, realization that, okay, I'm thinking now. Okay, I kind of lost track. Okay, now back to,
I think it's a
what I
big
was doing.
mistake to believe that you shouldn't be thinking when you're meditating because your mind is automatic.
Okay.
Your mind is automatic.
Right.
Like it's just gonna keep going blah
Right.
blah 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 blah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have total control over that. Meditation does help you, like if you focus on your body and stuff, it helps bring you into the present moment rather than like some of your worries about the future or regrets about the past. It can definitely reduce that flow. But yeah, forgiving yourself
Sure.
for the fact that your mind is always looking to be talking.
Sure, sure, sure. And like you said, the techniques that you were, or the technique that you recommended, that sort of focuses, or your central focus is more on the breathing and the energy and the emotions. So that sort of gets your, what would you say, your perspective or your
It
sort of like
occupies the mind, it gives it something to be occupied by, for sure.
yeah, exactly. The main the center of your awareness is not really on your thoughts anymore. You totally change perspectives, right? So
Yeah.
that can help a lot, I think. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good
Yeah, I
technique.
mean that's
Uh,
definitely something I read a lot in whatever comment sections is, people are like, "Oh, I can't stop my brain when I'm thinking." I'm like, when I'm meditating, I'm like, "That's you're missing the point. It's not the point." You
mhm.
have to forgive yourself for the fact that that's what your mind, which, that's what your ego wants to do all the time. So you have to let the thoughts do what they do, and you don't take them seriously. You don't mistake them for
Right,
who you
right.
are. It's just your mind talking. And that's one of the biggest breakthroughs I had early on, well, I guess midway on, but that you are not your mind,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're
That's
you're
a
the listening, right? So don't mistake the speaking for who you really are.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I remember this is some old school reference. You might get this one, but do you remember the popular book in the '60s? It was "Be Here Now" by Ram
Oh,
Dass.
I know
I'm
Ram
sure you
Dass,
probably
sure.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and he always talked about the witness, right? Like you're not the thoughts; it's
Yeah,
the awareness behind it. The witness, he
exactly.
calls it, right? Uh huh, uh huh.
That's
And
Eckhart
so, yeah, I think
Tolle's thing too.
yeah,
Yeah.
you make a good point too. A lot of people they try to like, it's like they're trying to stop thinking, which that creates even more resistance, right? So it's like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
gonna go into meditation and try to kill the mind and stop thinking when and it works a lot better, at least for me, and it sounds like for you too, and most people. So it's not like you're trying to kill your brain from thinking or you're going in a battle to stop thinking. It's more that you shift your focus to something else, right? It's
Yeah.
more of a shift
Yeah.
rather than
And
some sort of
that's why, like,
yeah.
letting go of your emotions, because it's more of like a felt thing than a thought thing, is more productive. And you don't have to name your emotions. You don't have to recognize that this emotion, you can, but you don't have to recognize like exactly what it is. You can just feel it in your body.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, that's really good. Yeah, and a lot of us, especially guys, I would say, is we'll have a tendency to be more cerebral or logical. And so just getting in touch with your feelings can be very powerful. I think a
Absolutely.
lot of women are kind of naturally intuitive or naturally emotional, but as a guy, getting yourself out of your head into your emotional body, that alone can be a huge, like almost like a transcendent
Yeah.
experience because
Yeah.
you're not used to experiencing the world in that way, right? It's a whole different,
Yeah. I
what
mean,
would you say, a whole
yeah,
different shift. Yeah.
the guys are, not supposed to show their emotions, or it's a weakness. Of course, that's all
Mm-hmm,
ego. The like, I'm weak if I do this or that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A lot of social conditioning kind of
Yeah,
forces. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Okay, cool. So I remember that when we caught up the last time, you kept mentioning this book called Letting Go,
yeah.
The Pathway to Surrender. And I recently started it. I'm probably about a quarter in and really like the content so far. Like, it started out, I was like, oh, all right, this is okay. And then it just got, it's getting really good. Um, and so maybe, how did you find out about this book? That'd be a good question.
Well, I was, sheltering in place and watching, self improvement videos, and Russell Brand is a particular
Mm,
favorite of mine. He's got really good stuff to say about relationships, actually, and
mhm,
eliminating our ego in relationships. But
mhm.
yeah, so it came up as a book that um, he recommended and talked about, and then it showed up in like my YouTube feed, and so I started listening to it, and And then like as I was listening to in the first quarter, I like immediately had two major breakthroughs in emotions I was holding on to.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, like the first one was I'd become a total nihilist through the last election in politics, and just thinking, the world's gonna end, we're all gonna die because everyone's an idiot, and we're the pollution, and no
Sure.
one does anything to take care of it. And there was this the emotion is fear. The emotion
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
fear, and that's a lot
That's
of what
that's
politics sells, right?
Sure, sure. I mean, I think that's a downside of like social media. You have chat groups or Facebook groups or Instagram or whatever, right? Every time you
Yeah,
look at something,
I'm
oftentimes the narratives that get driven are those that stir up negative emotions, right? Just
yeah.
nonstop.
And
So,
like, of course, in the last 4 years, and a lot of like, you know, side X is evil. No, it's side Y that's evil.
oh,
So
sure.
there's also anger and resentment. A lot of that.
Hmm.
So I just had this sudden moment of clarity that I was trying to be master of the universe, and like I actually had no power, and all this fear emotion was like hurting my body, hurting me physically, hurting me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and was adding no value to my life. And so I did the visualization meditation technique and
Hmm.
let go of all the fear. And then, as I let go of that fear, which had been so massive, such a burden, there was an
Hmm.
immediate surge of energy, because it takes so much energy to hold on to that.
Sure, sure. But I think a lot of people are probably in the position that you were, right?
Yeah.
And so it becomes I think Eckhart Tolle talks about this in The Power of Now, like the pain body, right? Like,
Yeah.
so for example, Trump, the reason my life sucks is because of Trump. I hate Trump, Trump. And then you go on Facebook and you post about Trump, and then you complain to your friends about Trump
Yeah.
and, or whatever it is. It could,
Well, one thing to
replace Trump.
realize is that there's a payoff, right? There's a payoff
Right.
to that stuff. Like, it's not my
Uh-huh.
fault, or I'm
Right,
better than
right.
the other people. That's a payoff. I'm better than these other people. It like really
Right,
boosts your ego. So you have to like acknowledge and let go
exactly.
of the payoffs.
You're right, exactly. But it becomes like it's almost like you just become an addict. You create this pain body, you create this entity, right?
Mm.
And you just need to keep feeding it to stay alive too. It's like then you're up at night. Oh, what's the latest about Trump? Is it Russia? Is it what did he say? What did he tweet? And then you just want to keep, you check your phone log. Oh, see, I knew that motherfucker. He did it again. Look what he said. It
Yeah.
just becomes this like it's like you need the next bump of Coke or something. It
Yeah.
really. And it's like the whole time it's just such a waste of time where you could have, it's not enriching your life in any way, in any real
No.
way, right?
And
It's a very
when
low
you
vibrational energy
connect,
to get attached to.
when you let that go, and you're able to connect, well, there's a chart, and the higher levels you expand, right? So in the lower levels
Hmm.
you're in like fear and shame and guilt and anger, and the higher levels it's like love and joy and peace, and you expand. And when you connect with that love, you actually feel sorry for like Trump. There's a compassion for the other
Hmm.
side.
Hmm.
Yeah, you don't. I don't know. It's a better feeling, and it's not like I feel sorry for, like, oh, I feel sorry for him. I'm better. It's
Right, right, right.
it's a
That would still be
true. It's a
egotistical
yeah.
to
It's
think
it's
about it
like
that
a
way.
true
Right,
compassion for everybody, really.
right. Right. Speaking of that chart, so I'm in the part of the book right now where at least he discussed it one or two points. Talked about the chakras a little bit, and then he talked about different emotions. And he said something like, I forgot the name of the chart, but he said on the bottom there's like guilt and shame,
Yeah.
fear, yeah, these kind of things. And then at the top you have love and
So
peace, joy,
yeah.
enlightenment. So
Right. So
yeah, maybe you can
I'm looking at the
expand
chart right
on
now.
it.
So if you imagine like an upside down cone, right? So that at the top it's expansive, and at the bottom it narrows down. Are the negative emotions, which are contracting, who we are in the universe, who we are in the world, right? And the lowest level is shame and guilt, which is like suicidal thoughts, total abandonment of like any hope, right?
Right.
And actually like fear and desire and anger are a little bit higher up because they have more energy behind them.
Sure.
And then you get up a little bit further to like kind of a normal life would be like courage or neutrality or willingness where you're like able to connect. So like as I see it as not like linear but like up and down. So you're like you kind of like dip in and out if you're a normal
Hmm.
person. But at the higher levels, you're able to like connect to that love sometimes, and you understand what it's like, and then you kind of like live a normal life, and you go through your practice, and the goal
Hmm.
then is to like live in those higher states for longer periods of time because of the value they bring. Um,
Sure, sure. And you can kind of be aware of what what triggers these things, I would say too, right? Like, so for example, say you log into Facebook and you're, to go back to the analogy of earlier, it's like, yeah, fuck Trump. And then,
yeah. Well, this
you get
is this
addicted
is
to
why
this
I've
and
like
you
tried
can
to
kind of
eliminate
notice,
all news from my feeds. Like, no
right?
news.
Okay. That's like
News
you
lives
can
in fear.
mitigate. Yeah.
News lives in like feeding the lower states. Uh,
Sure. So you can kind of see what triggers this sort of lower vibration, this sort of contraction, right? And even mitigate it. Like for you, you said you block certain feeds or, right? Things like this.
yeah, I mean, as we improve, then we're affected less by triggers and we're
Hmm.
stronger. But while you're working on getting to that state, being around positive people, being around positive feedback and like shrinking the negative triggers is definitely good policy.
Right. Exactly. It's all where you put your focus. And yeah, like you said, the more you're able to, I would say the more you're able to stay centered and mindful and, the more these practices are ingrained in you, then yeah, I mean, it's not really going to affect you as much, but it's not like you're going to consciously seek out like, oh, I'm going to go on the news and mentally masturbate to this for 12 hours or something like that. Right. So, but yeah, definitely
A lot of
mitigating
people
it by
do. A
not
lot of people
actually
do.
doing it, right, can help. Yeah. Um, all right. So, okay. So what were your, after reading the book, did you read it one time or did you read it several times by now?
I'm on my like fifth listening, and I'm about 30% through the hard copy. My ego is definitely uh,
Hmm.
kind of blocking me from like there's resistance in going through the hard copy because it's like more intense to like have to read through it and highlight and definitely a bit more of a challenging exercise than just listening through it. But yeah, I listened through it 4 times. Um,
Okay.
so I think it's one of those ones that you study and get deeper understanding with each study. I mean, a large portion of the book is him going through each emotions on the scale, each of the emotions on the scale, and discussing, what those look like, what those feel like, what our actions are, what the opposite actions would be,
Sure.
so that we can recognize, our lower states and our higher states as we go through those. So, like I,
Hmm.
I was listening to the one on Pride this evening, and I was like, oh no, it's totally me.
Yeah, it's like you're reading. Yeah, they perfectly describe me in this book.
Yeah, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
The
good.
best. Mhm.
Once you
The
recognize it, you can handle it. Hopefully.
Right. I find the best books are those types where you can go back later. You read it a few times and then you go back a year later or months later, a few years later, and you just get even more from it, right? Like it's another teaching opens to you read it before, but it didn't really resonate or that door wasn't really open at that point in time, right? But then you go back in a second reading, third reading, and then it's like another key gets unlocked, right?
Yeah.
Another lesson presents itself. Those are really, really good books. Kind
Yeah.
of like The Power of Now was kind of like that for me. I read it a few
Yeah,
times, and each
Eckhart
time it was
Tolle is
like a
definitely
different.
like that. Definitely.
Yeah, it was like a different. It was like reading a different book in some respects, right? Each
As
for
yeah,
me at least. Yeah.
as we grow, our openness to new information grows too. Like the first time I heard Eckhart Tolle, my mom had like given me some CDs. This was still the '90s, so giving me some CDs to listen to because I was going through a tough time, and I was just like, I fucking hate this guy's voice. Why is he talking so slow? Speed it up, bro. Come on. Absolutely hated the guy. Because that's the state I was at. I was in a total pain body, total
Mhm,
resistance.
mhm,
So, that's, I hope that people are open and ready for like immediate and rapid success, but sometimes we have to start at where we're at and slowly work towards it.
mhm. Okay. Totally agree there. What would you say, are maybe like the biggest, I don't know, maybe the biggest takeaways, or like what have you gotten the most out of the book, would you say?
It's definitely the key super secret is our emotions are responsible for thousands of thoughts. So Byron Katie and her book The Work is excellent when it comes to like how to handle negative thinking. But
Mhm,
the the ability to like immediately just release thousands of thoughts by releasing an emotion is a game changer.
mhm,
So that's the really big takeaway. Like the another realization I had when I was going through the first listening of the book was just about an idea I had from childhood and being like a middle child, and that it's not enough. That I had like
mm,
this historical emotional holding, that
mhm,
so you can like go back and like heal your childhood emotions and let those go, and like once again the once you release that, because it takes so much energy to hold on to that, you have like massive amounts of energy, you open up your heart chakra.
mhm,
So I the efficiency of handling your spiritual growth at the level of emotion and through the art of letting go, because you can let go of stories about your life also, it can be at the level of thought, but just letting go and not doing it from like a logical, not trying to tackle the problem of mind on the level of mind.
Yeah, I think in the book he says something like the emotions are the root behind the thought, right?
Yeah,
They're coming from those negative thoughts or whatnot are coming from the emotion. So he's giving you like, let's get to the root of it, where let's focus on the
yeah,
emotions, right?
and yeah, and
Hmm.
and so it's just so much more efficient than any other method I've used before. Like you can just like make massive progress in a few short minutes of practicing letting go.
Hmm.
And the secret part of it too is like you don't have to add something to achieve a higher level. It's just removing obstacles. So when you let
Okay.
go, you actually are raising your consciousness level.
Hmm.
So that's the part that makes it effortless, right? Is because it's just like dropping something. It's the release of effort, not an increase
Sure.
in effort. So it's efficient and effortless. So those to me are like really really great tools.
Right. That kind of reminds me of Taoism.
Mm.
What's it called? I think it's called the concept of like Wu Wei. I might be wrong here, but it's sort of this effortless attunement with the Tao. It's not.
Action
It's
through
like you said. It's you.
non-action. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, it sounds like a pretty interesting approach there.
Yeah, I
Um.
also felt like it connected with Taoism in that sense too, in that you know it's not effort. And this is we were talking about meditation earlier. This is where people make the mistake in meditation is they put so much effort into meditation, and it's like the opposite of how it should feel, or where how it should actually be if you're doing it correctly, because it's the release of effort.
Mhm. Right. It's letting go, not holding on to your fighting
Exactly.
against.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. A lot of people, that's a good one. A lot of people are like, meditation is me fighting my mind and holding on to this,
Yeah.
cycle rather than just going in and letting go,
Yeah.
focusing on that,
Yeah.
release. Yeah. So, okay, cool. How would you say that you apply these teachings from this book in your own life? Maybe you could give an example or anecdote or something like that that shows how you use the information.
Um, well, I guess I did give a few examples. Like
Mm,
I released an old story from childhood that even wasn't not even consciously aware of, until I started reading this
mhm.
book about like it's not enough. My whole story about like it's not enough living in poverty. Because here's the interesting thing too, is what we hold in our mind is what we draw into our reality. So even an unconscious belief like it's not enough kind of like holds you in a state of poverty.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
so that's been a huge release, and letting go of my nihilistic tendencies, my cynical tendencies around
Mhm.
the world and everyone else, and just every day you use it because you're gonna go out into the world and you're gonna interact with people, and you're gonna be waiting on the bus and it's gonna be 10 minutes late and you're gonna be like, man, it's cold, bus driver, I hate you.
Right, right. You
Right.
can choose to focus or embrace those emotions, right? And
Yeah.
hold on to those, or
So
you
yeah,
can sort of you can let go, as
just
you
let
mentioned, and shift to a
so
more
yeah.
expansive,
So
right?
letting go is kind of like a technique you use all day, every day, um, throughout the day. And being and that's kind of where I was talking about like being your higher consciousness. You have to be when you're your higher consciousness, you're aware that you're the listening. So when your thoughts creep in about the bus driver's an asshole because he's late, you recognize, oh, that's just my mind talking. I don't have to believe that. I'm
Mm,
gonna let that go. So being conscious
sure.
of it and like understanding about letting go and recognizing when you have negative emotions welling up.
Sure, sure. That's
Yeah,
what I think the value of having a meditation practice, or like you said, you practice that letting go technique, sort of visualization and whatnot. I think that a value of doing something like this consistently daily, for me personally, was that I'm able to, as you mentioned, awareness while you are at the bus stop and you're about to get pissed off because the bus driver's an asshole or what have you, right? The more that you do these practices, it kind of bleeds into your daily life, and you're more aware, or you have you're able to recognize these patterns, right? That sort of meditative visualization practice that you're talking about can bleed into the other areas, so that you're aware when you're kind of start harboring those emotions or thoughts or those loops that you get into, and you're able to pull, let go of that
yeah.
or
Well,
pull
like
yourself
like
out of it.
specifically, fear is one of our greatest problem causers. Fear and anger. Like think of a job interview and how
Sure.
when you're really nervous about that job interview, is your performance during the job interview better or worse?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
worse. It's
Obviously
the
not
more the
better,
more
right? Yeah.
fear you have, the worse your performance is going to be during that job interview. Whereas, like if you're able to let go of all that fear, suddenly it looks like confidence,
Sure.
and
Sure.
you're going to do much better. So these negative emotions actually get into our life and prevent us from performing our best in like many ways. Like the ego neediness that comes into dating, right?
Hmm.
That generates
Sure.
like conflict, and it makes like the girl run away because she feels like you need her to make you happy or whatever. And same,
Right, right, right,
and
right.
you even like come into that date with that nervousness and that neediness, and it's definitely going to decrease, the chances that things are going to go well.
Sure, sure, sure. That's why I think, on another level, people need to be somewhat aware of what kind of content they consume. We were talking about the news earlier, right? Or, especially with the internet out there, there's so much information. It's information overload, right? So, there's a bunch of information like, oh, women are bitches. What do they call that? Like the red pill
The
stuff.
red pill
It's all
stuff,
their
yeah.
fault, and Yeah, you can choose to complain like women are just trying to screw you over and get money out of you or whatever. There's all these thoughts, right? There's
A
all
lot
these
of it, and that's why like I have a hard time staying in chat groups. It's the same thing with like there's this kind of online we're even worse than we are in person.
Sure. It's yeah, because you're anonymous, right? But it's like yeah, it's like I've seen these. There's like Reddit and all these forums or whatnot, right? And women are evil and they're trying to steal money out of you, and they only care about your looks or whatever. There's all these things out there, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like I read this and I'm like, man, it makes you feel like God, women must just be these evil devil conning.
Yeah, and how are you going to interact
right?
with women if that's how you feel about them? It's not. And what do you? Here's the thing. Once again, that which we focus on in our mind is that which we bring into our life. So, what kind of women do you think you'll actually be meeting when you think that way?
Yeah, you attract. You attract what you are. You attract what you think. It gives you certain glasses that you view interactions, and you start looking for. That's the thing where it's the old Hermetic axiom, right? Where your attention goes, energy flows. So you're putting all your only the negative, and then when you meet a woman, perhaps in this context for this analogy, then you're only looking for the negative, and then you're just going to keep confirming, like, see, I knew it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like for me, like I will read stuff like this and I'll just laugh about it. And then I'll go out and I'll meet a woman, or talk to a coworker or a student or whatever, right? And I'll be like, well, they're very nice people. I mean, this is like the opposite of my experience.
I'm always trying to find like the best in people, whatever the circumstances.
Sure. Bring out the best in people rather than bringing out the worst and focusing on the half glass empty or what have you, right?
So that's one thing that he says later in the book. It starts, I forget which chapter this is. It might be desire or it might be a later chapter, but he talks about our goal with dating or with anybody really is to be of service, to go into any situation with the question of like, how can I be of service in this situation? How can I give rather than take?
Sure. And that changes everything.
Yeah, and that changes everything. And when you give to the universe, when you give to the world, in a sense, you're giving to yourself, and don't do it out of a desire to get, but at the same time, things flow back to you.
Sure. Exactly. It really is kind of a choice, right? It is really where you put your focus. It reminds me of like Bill Hicks, an old comedian who died a long time ago.
I'm familiar with Hicks.
He always said it was like a choice. What's that?
I'm familiar, definitely. He's a Texan.
Oh, wow. That's right. Yeah. Wasn't he from, I read his biography. I think he was from Austin, which is the town you're in, right?
That is correct.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. He always said it was like a choice between fear and love. You can turn on the TV. It's like war, killing, rape, the world sucks, and then he's like, wait a minute. He's like, I step outside my house, birds are chirping, beautiful people walking around, great music. He's like, wait a minute, what's going on? It's like, it's where you where you choose to really, live out of, what state you focus on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We have to be careful about that. We have to take personal responsibility for that. And we were talking earlier about like, what's the value of it? Like when I was off the path, Carl Jung talks about self-actualization. I think even Maslow talks about self-actualization as like part of our human hierarchy of needs. So whether you're conscious or unconscious of it, you have a need for self-actualization. And when you're off the path, when you're out of your ethics, you can go into a negative state, an unhealthy negative state. Sure. So it is important. Like we think about Anthony Bourdain or other famous people that you're like, they have everything in their life. Why would they, be so miserable as to take their own life?
Sure.
It's because they didn't. The spiritual path is the main path, and everything else flows from there.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good analogy. Totally agree. Okay. Who would you recommend this book to per se? I mean, I guess everyone, since it's sort of it's
I
kind of
would
like
definitely
the
recommend everybody check it out, no matter
okay.
where you think you are. Um, because like after having read many books, I think it's the most efficient way to approach the issue. Then if you want to understand, I have an advantage, and maybe you are similar, where like we've read so many other things that we can read this and we like know what he's talking about. Maybe not everybody
Mm,
would have
sure,
that.
sure.
And I also have had the experience of like becoming one with the universe. So when he talks about the higher levels of consciousness, I'm like, oh yeah, I have experience with that. So I know the truth
Mm,
of it, but other people may not. But you can read a book that you don't understand fully and then read other books that will help you. Like Eckhart Tolle is really good at describing what the ego is.
hmm
Byron Katie's really good at how to tackle negative thinking and negative thoughts. Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Heart of Buddhism, talks about like how to be in the world, and educates you
Mm,
on the Four Noble Truths and the
yeah.
Eightfold Path in a really clear way.
Yeah, his books are great. I don't remember the series, but there's a he has these little tiny books. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like God, I forgot the name of them right now. It's like how to eat, how to walk, how to
No,
sit.
I don't know.
No, but these are really good books. Like they're little tiny, like
Yeah.
hard to explain. They're like
Well,
almost
he's
like these little
he's good.
tiny
Like
anecdotes, but
what
so clearly and beautifully written.
Yeah, I got from him too in his book. He talks about like this is again about meditation. He's like meditation is your every action all day. So like there's
Mm,
dishwashing meditation, right? Like just
yeah,
being fully
exactly,
into the
exactly.
moment while you're doing the action. And I found that having released all this negative energy after listening, where I'm like, what used to be like cleaning my house, I'm enjoying it. I like
Right.
cleaning up. It makes me feel good. And that's another person, Jordan Peterson, that I got a lot from. And the whole
hmm
clean up your room, it has value.
Sure,
And
sure.
it's a form of meditation done the right way, done properly.
Hmm Okay, good. So I guess the listeners have some other books that they can kind of maybe is there any other books you'd recommend too? I mean, you just gave quite a lot of recommendations. They'll
Yeah.
probably be busy for a while, but any
Um,
other final thoughts or books or anything?
I would say David Goggins. I
Hmm
think a lot of what he says is still the level of mind and the level of ego, but it's also stoicism restated. So David Goggins was definitely a big help for me when I was going through a really hard time. So if you're at a hard point,
hmm
it's his thing is about being personally responsible for your own emotions, your own emotional state, and your own actions. So that's
mm
another one that I'd say like has value. And like I didn't actually read Jordan Peterson's book, but I liked his podcasts. So listening to like the Rogan podcast with Jordan Peterson
hmm
was good,
Okay,
and,
yeah,
and
that's
and
good.
other like interviews and talks he did. I just saw him on Russell Brand, really good interview there too.
Yeah, what's his Russell Brand has a podcast called
Under the
something the
shin?
skin
Oh,
under
under the
the
skin. That's it. I couldn't quite make out that second letter. Under the shin doesn't quite make as
under
much
the shin.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. His is yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
I think that now he has them. I think you have to pay to see the full episode now. They used to all be available, I believe, but
Well,
um,
he let like some of the older ones out onto YouTube. So like I just watched his full interview with Eckhart Tolle, which Eckhart Tolle gives a really good summary of his like ego definitions. And this is what I like about Russell Brand is he also just shuts the fuck up and lets the other guy talk. So
mhm,
it's like 90% Eckhart Tolle summarizing ego and the issues with ego. And yeah, the Jordan Peterson one was also very interesting, and it says like 80% Jordan Peterson.
nice, nice. Yeah,
So
he's a good facilitator of
yeah,
just bringing out the best teachings of that
yeah,
person. So that's
and
good.
yeah,
Very good.
and Russell Brand's another good one to look at. Like I said, like I've been really impressed with like his discussions of relationships, like the problems and how to be good in relationships. And I really like a very important one he talks about is communication, and always being always in communication, like to develop relationships. So being of service to your partner, being in communication, honesty creates intimacy. All those things are important when it comes to like building and growing, close relationships. And that's not just dating. That's like with other human beings in your life as well.
Sure. And he's also a very funny comedian too.
He's also funny, yeah.
So he's got it all going on for him all around.
So that helps.
All around cool guy, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So I think we pretty much covered everything, and maybe in the future we can. It's kind of fun to go over a book like this and sort of the main teachings and everything. And I know we have a lot of similar interests, so maybe in the future there'll be another book we can summarize or discuss and talk about what we got out of it or something like that. That would be fun too.
Yeah, feel free to send me any recommended reading. Also, I always seek to improve, and there's always like, one new thing or a few new things you learn from a great teacher that help, enhance your own practice.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of deepen it. Just sometimes you read a book and it's like one thing, but that one thing is huge, right?
Very valuable, yeah.
That one little, like you were saying, like going from the mind to focusing on emotions, like that one shift was like key, right? That's if you have to kind of summarize from this book.
Yeah, so efficient, like just massively increases your spiritual efficiency, which cannot be underestimated because, like once again, there's people who are like meditating for 2 hours a day and getting like nothing out of it, or like do it, but it's like a struggle and they have to do it every day because it's like doesn't last them. So yeah, I appreciate efficiency, and yeah, with Toll, I love him, but it's harder to hold on, and he's less good at defining specific practices for you to achieve those states. Right. Byron Katie is good for like tackling mind at the level of mind, and this one's definitely good for leveling up how you tackle the issue of like getting closer to your spiritual state.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think we'll wrap it up here, but until next time.
It's been awesome.